Hi everybody, it's Missy and Jim, and we are back from the Star Valley Branch Library. We're out here in the beautiful Canyon View Park getting ready to do a casting class. We are glad that you could join us, and we hope that you learned something today.
Morning everyone. So let's start casting today. So the first thing I want to mention about casting is that you're really making two casts. If you can get that concept in your head, it will help you immensely. So if you think about it, you're going to make one back cast. Then you're going to make one forward cast. Those are two different casts. And then eventually you're going to put the two together. Okay, that being said, let's talk about the mechanics of doing that. So the most important thing that you have to start with is you have to generate energy from your arm through the rod to get that load that we had talked about in previous videos. You have to load the rod. That's where the rod bends. Now, we talked about this. You see where that rod is loading is in the, this is considered a fast action rod, a medium fast action rod. So it loads up in the front end of this rod. Now, by me pulling on it like this, I'm loading it with energy. That's what you have to do when it's on the ground. When you pull it back and start to throw it, you're bending that rod or loading it so that it can pick the line up and lay it out. That's number one. You have to load it with energy. Number two, this is important because this is the part where people start to lose their cast. You have to be able to come to an abrupt stop. In other words, again, if I loaded this rod and let it go like a slingshot, when it straightens out, it stops. So like that. Now notice how straight my line went. So number two, your rod has to come to a complete stop. Okay, and number three, think of it more as your rod tip. Your rod tip has to travel in a straight line. So what I mean by that is your cast should look like this. Now, if you're doing a normal cast over a basic cast, it might be here. If you're doing a side cast, it might be here. It might look like this over your head. But wherever it is, the tip of your rod must travel in a straight line. I call this wanding. This is what happens to most people when they begin fly fishing, is they start and they go like this. That's what I call wanding. Your line is never going to travel in a straight line. You're never going to get a tight loop, and we'll talk about tight loops. If you're trying to do this, your rod has to travel straight, straight, straight. Now, some people will say 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock. That's a good way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it, because of our size, think about it as your eyes. Eye level. Eye level in the front, eye level in the back. Another aspect to think about. You want to be able to have your line lay out. Your line has to lay out in order for you to make the second cast. We'll talk more about that when we're casting, because if your line doesn't lay out, if you watch this again, it should go straight out on the lawn. I didn't load that one enough. If I did that again and loaded it more, now it's out there. So keeping your rod in a straight line will help you keep tighter loops. And you have to keep tight loops in order to make good casts. We'll talk more about that later. Two more things I want to talk about as far as mechanics go. This is more about just the progression of learning. Always learn to fly cast out on some open space like this on a lawn. Two reasons. One, you have a lot of room to cast. Two, the lawn won't damage your fly line. Like we talked about in previous videos, that's expensive. This fly line is expensive. Don't go out in the gravel or in asphalt and try to cast. Come out here on a lawn and do that. Now, this is where you're going to learn the mechanics. To progress, don't go jump in a stream right away. Go to a pond or to a lake. And here's why. Two things. You go to a pond or a lake, then I'm going to say to you, okay, now put a leader and a fly on. Because now you need to start seeing how you are interacting with the water. In other words, are you really laying your line out at the water? In other words, if your fly is slapping the water, then you're bringing your rod tip too fast and too low. Your line should lay out like this and then set to the water. Now when I say set to the water, I'm talking about like so. But if it's laying out up here, what's going to happen is it's going to start to flutter. And by the time it hits the water, your line's going to be all over the place in the water. So, and if it just slaps the water, you've scared the fish out of the hole, and you've not got a good presentation. So you want your line to lay out and then lay on the water. The other aspect is, when you're doing a roll cast, having water in front of you where you learn to pick line up off the water. In other words, if you have line out in the water and you jerk it out of the water, it makes a racket and a big noise. When you're trying to fish, that is not what you want to do. You want to learn to pick your fly up off the water, not jerk it out of the water. The other thing is, having water in front of you for a roll cast will change the dynamics of the roll cast. And it actually will be better than this grass, so it's a good place to progress, to learn how to do that. And because you're at a pond, again, you'll have lots of room, lots of space for back casting. You're not going to make a lot of mistakes because you're not trying to hit that little hole in that stream way over there. You're just trying to learn how to get your line in and out of the water. So those are the things that I would start to talk about as far as progression of learning how to cast a rod before you actually step into a stream.